Hi, this is Dan from Bible Prophecy and Truth. Today we're going to talk about prophecy and what it is and can it really be understood. Most people think that it can't, that it's just impossible to understand prophecy, but the Bible says differently. In Daniel 11:33 it says, "And they that understand among the people shall instruct many." Daniel 12:10, "Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly. And none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand." Now in Daniel 11 and 12, it's talking about the time of the Antichrist. And it's talking about those that understand and how they that do will instruct people and help others to understand. In Matthew 24, when Jesus was talking about the signs of the last day, he said, "So likewise ye, when ye shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled." He was giving us signs to look for and knowledge of what was going to happen in the end times so that we would know. It's not supposed to be a mystery. And then there's one scripture that everybody quotes all the time when I talk to people about prophecy. One of the things that they quote is, "Well, everybody knows that the day of the Lord comes as a thief in the night. That nobody can know. Nobody knows the day or the hour." But in two verses later in 1 Thessalonians, Paul writes, "But ye, brethren, are not in darkness, that that day should overtake you as a thief. Ye are children, ye are all children of the light, and the children of the day. We are not of the night, nor of darkness." Paul is saying that the day of the Lord comes as a thief in the night only to those who are in darkness, not to the people of God. And the Bible contains about 30% prophecy, meaning that 30% of the Bible is talking about a future event at the time it was written. And most of that is about the end time. It's about the last days. It's because God wants us to know. He wants us to understand what's coming, what to expect. And he actually expects us to know. He told us to watch. There's several examples in the Bible. This one in Revelation 16 says, "Behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he that watcheth, and keepeth his garments, lest he walk naked, and they see his shame." In Luke, there's an example where God says, he said also to the people, "When you see a cloud rise out of the west, straightway you say, well, there comes a shower, and so it is. And when you see a south wind blow, you say, there will be heat, and it comes to pass." He's saying, we know the weather. We can tell when there's red skies at night, sailor's delight, right? That's just a common saying, and we all know what the weather is going to be. We can tell the signs. But he said, he was talking to the Pharisees in Luke, and he said, "You hypocrites, you can discern the face of the sky and of the earth, but how is it you do not discern this time?" It's because he was chastising them for not knowing who he was, because they had prophecy of him. They had dozens of prophecies in the Old Testament about Jesus that Jesus fulfilled, and they didn't know who he was. They didn't understand, and he's chastising them for it. They should have understood. He also says, "Watch ye therefore and pray always, that ye may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass, and stand before the Son of Man." Now in Matthew 25, directly after he talked to the disciples and told them all about the signs that we would see in the last days and what to expect, he gave a parable of virgins with lamps that were to meet the bridegroom and escort the bride with the bridegroom to his home in a marriage, which was customary back in that day. And the parable was that about half of the maidens didn't bring enough oil, and when the bridegroom didn't come for a little while, it was a little late, that they ran out of oil and they weren't able to go in to the marriage ceremony and after the wedding, and they weren't able to go in. And that's the parable, the lesson there is that we need to watch. We need to be prepared at all times. We shouldn't just be going along not understanding and not, we need to be full of the Spirit at all times. We need to be studying and learning and watching and being prepared. And that's what Jesus was talking about there. We should know and understand the signs when they appear, and we should instruct others and should be ready when the time comes. And here's the thing, in Daniel 12, Daniel was asking about the vision that he'd had and the explanation of it. And God said, "Go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed until the time of the end." And it's not that the words are closed up and sealed forever. The words were closed up and sealed till the time of the end. God used symbolic pictures and symbology to basically paint a picture of what the last days would be. And it's not that we're smarter or more spiritual than people in the past. It's just that it's the time of the end now. So God painted the picture in a way that it would be easy to understand at the time of the end, but it would not be understandable at all before then. And that's the difference between now and in the past, is now that we are in the end time, we can actually understand the pictures that God gave us. And the first one that I want to talk about is Daniel 7. And God used animals to represent kings and rulers and the nations they ruled over. And in Daniel 7, Daniel has a vision of a sea, which is the sea of creation, basically, and the sea of the world and everything that's progressing through it. And he sees a lion with eagle's wings come out of the sea, and he sees a bear with 3 ribs in its mouth, and he sees a leopard with 4 heads, with the wings of a fowl. And then he sees this 4th great and terrible beast that has 10 horns. And in Daniel 7, it says that these beasts are all kings. It says these beasts that rise out of the sea are kings of the earth. And in Daniel 7, it goes on to tell us that the kings would be present at the time of the return of Jesus Christ. It says that these beasts are there, and Christ returns, and the Ancient of Days sits, and it even says that those that are alive and remain at the end, their lives would be prolonged for a season at a time. These are nations that are going to exist at the time of the return of Jesus, when he puts down the governments of men. And then in Revelation 13, John gives us a picture of the same 4 beasts, except they're all one beast now. It's a 7-headed, 10-horned beast, because the leopard had 4 heads. And there was a lion, a bear, and a leopard with 4 heads, and then this 4th beast with 10 horns. That's a total of 7 heads, 10 horns. It tells us specifically that the dragon, which is Satan, gives him his power. It's a representation of the Antichrist and his power base in the last days. And again, these are pictures that God gave us so that we could understand in the last days. And so the lion, the bear, and the leopard, and this fearful 10-horned beast of Daniel 7, these are nations that are going to exist at the last day. And in Revelation 13, we see that they're brought together in one beast, which is it's a symbol of the nations of the world that the Antichrist brings together for his military power base, where he controls the world. We've got 3 different nations with this dreadful 10-horned beast all together in one ruling body, basically. And that's what it is. And then in Revelation 17, we see that there's a woman riding the 7-headed, 10-horned beast. In Revelation 17, it's talking about the great whore, that it's a woman. It's depicted as a woman, and she's basically turned on God and has gone whoring after other gods, is basically the verbiage that God uses in His Word. And it's this woman riding this seven-headed, ten-horned beast. And what it is a picture of the false prophet riding the coattails of the Antichrist. The Antichrist is the beast. He's the one that's his ruling body, the nations that he rules as he's taking over the world. And the 10 horns are 10 kings who give their power to the Antichrist. That's what it says in Revelation 17, that those 10 horns are 10 kings specifically that give their power to the Antichrist, and God puts it in their hearts to do so, to fulfill His will. And this woman that's riding the beast is the false prophet. And we talk about the Antichrist and the false prophet more in some of the other Bible studies and videos that I'm making. And the false prophet is going to do things like pull fire from thin air, kind of pull fire from the sky, and show this power. It's going to be the power of Satan, but the false prophet is going to say that it's the power of God and going to cause the world to worship the Antichrist by doing these miracles in the sight of men. And so you can see God has painted this picture for us in several different ways. He shows us in Daniel 7 that there's 4 beasts that will arise out of the sea and will be nations that exist at the time of His return. And then in Revelation 13, we see that those beasts are all going to be brought together into a one world government, the New World Order. And it's going to be the power base of the Antichrist, and the false prophet is going to ride on that power. And then in Daniel 2, we kind of have a different picture where Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and it was interpreted that there was a 5-sectioned statue. There was a head of gold, the chest of silver, the brass loins, and the iron legs, and then the feet and toes of iron mingled with clay. It had 5 sections to it, and it was told specifically that each section represented a world power, ruling the known world as in succession from the time of Babylon till the return of Jesus Christ. It shows that the statue in Daniel 2, it shows a rock coming out and smashing it on the feet, which the feet are the last ruling body, ruling power, and that the rock is a symbol of Jesus Christ coming and putting down the government's men, just as it talks about in Daniel 7, where He's going to put down the governments of men and take over. Same thing in Revelation, where Christ returns, destroys the armies of the Antichrist, takes over the world, and then rules and reigns for 1,000 years until at the end of that, then eternity with God begins for those that love God. And in Daniel 2, that final 5th section of the statue has 10 toes. And the 10 toes are the same representation as the 10 horns of Daniel 7, Revelation 13 and 17, where it says that those 10 horns are 10 kings that give their power to the Antichrist. And it's the same representation that we saw then. It's also the same timing that we see in Revelation, where we see the time of the Antichrist and the 42 months that he's in power it shows that same timing throughout prophecy. And as we study more, and I'm going to be doing some more videos. I've got a very lengthy article on understanding Revelation. And if you haven't read it, I recommend doing it. It's very, very interesting to go through Revelation verse by verse and see exactly how to understand it and how to understand prophecy. But I'll also be doing a video series to cover that as well. And then, so when we look at prophecy, God gave us symbolic representation of the kings that rule the known world from Babylon to the Antichrist in Daniel 2. Was that statue and the interpretation of it. And He showed us which end time nations would be aligned with the Antichrist So he gave us a picture of the nations of the world, that now that it's the end time, we can actually understand who those nations are. And we can understand that they're going to be in power, and they're going to be used by the Antichrist. They're going to align with the Antichrist to give him his military power base to rule the world. He also gave us a picture of events that lead up to the last day, which is the day of the Lord, when he returns. And that's in the seals, trumpets, and vials of Revelation. And I'm going to be doing some more videos on the 7 seals and the 7 trumpets, and talking about the 7 vials. And there's a great deal of information that God gave us in those, and what to expect and what we're going to see, and so we can even see the timing happening. He even showed us where the Antichrist would come from, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. And so he gave us time frames for the last day as well. There's 7 years from the confirmation of the covenant till the time that Christ returns, which is the confirmation of the covenant is when the world as a whole will come together. It says in Daniel 9:27 that the Antichrist will confirm the covenant with many for 7 years, a week of years, which is 7 years. And so there's going to be, when that happens, when the borders of Israel are defined and the world signs a peace treaty and the status of Jerusalem is settled, then for that 7-year peace treaty, that's going to be the confirmation of the covenant. That's when we're going to know that there's 7 years left before Christ returns. And the Bible also tells us very explicitly that there's going to be 3.5 years where the Antichrist is in power. It tells us explicitly in Revelation 13 that the Antichrist will be given power for 42 months, which is exactly 3.5 years. And then we have other instances in many different places that we'll be talking about, going into great detail in other videos on Bible studies. And it tells us that there's going to be 1,260 days, 1,290 days, several times, giving us time, times, and half a time, which in Old Testament verbiage, that's a year, 2 years, and half a year. So we're given 3.5 years in many, many places. We know that this is going to be the time of the tribulation. This is going to be in Daniel 12, or not Daniel 12, sorry, in Revelation 12, we're shown that Satan will be cast to the earth having great wrath because he knows that his time is short. And it's going to be for 3.5 years. And this will be the time of the great tribulation that Jesus talked about, and the time of trouble that Daniel mentions. And then we also have a time frame of 2,300 days, which is 6.3 years from when the Antichrist, in the book of Daniel, when the Antichrist stands up and begins gathering his power. That's going to be 0.7 years in after the confirmation of the covenant. It's going to be about approximately 8 months after the signing of that peace treaty. This man is going to stand up and begin gathering power to take over the world, and he actually will in the midst of that 7 weeks. At the 3.5 year mark, or very close to it anyway, he's going to actually take over the world. He's going to sit in the temple of God, showing that he is God, and he's going to come in the name of peace and take over the world. And then we also have the vials, which are the wrath of God. It tells us specifically in Revelation 15 and 16 that the vials are the wrath of God, and it will be poured out on the world in the last few weeks of that final 7 years. So we know that God told us what to expect. He gave us signs to look for, so we know when it will happen. He expects us to watch. He gave us the timelines. He gave us a who, what, where, when, and how. He wants us to watch and be prepared. And we are the people who will understand among the people and will instruct many. So I'm going to stop this video now. This is part 1 of 2 parts of Prophecy Explained, and I will continue in part 2.